Welcome to Kermode Uncut. I did a blog a couple of weeks ago talking about my worry that the films that I consider to be recent are actually old films, and asking you what was the most recent film that you can think of that you categorise as being old. This was all part and parcel of my general anxiety that I think that anything after the turn of the century is a new film, but that's like 16 years ago. Anyway, loads of responses from you. I wanted to read some of them out. This is from Mr. Jim Jam. Until recently, I considered Heat to be recent. Then I watched it again and realised how big the mobile phones are and how relatively young Robert De Niro looks. This I really liked from Alan with 21s. I was born in 1985, and 1999 was the year I started to take film seriously, kind of almost turn of the century. I consider any film post-Jurassic Park to be new, any film pre-1960 old, and all films in between, well, I don't know, I just don't think about it. But I'm starting to get a few grey hairs, and the fact that one of my co-workers was born after The Matrix came out makes me feel about 106. Here's a couple of replies which tie nicely together. This from DH2000. I was born in 1964, nearly the same age as me, and so the most recent old films are mid-1990s. The turning point being as Tom Hanks gained gravitas and lost his boyishness, i.e. Forrest Gump, 1993, old, Apollo 13, 1 year later, recent. And that's interesting because I think that Forrest Gump has gravitas. It's a kind of Oscar winner, so I think that's the point that it changed. But this from Anthony Quinn. I consider a film old if Tom Hanks is thin, Tommy Lee Jones looks young, and you can understand what Nick Nolte is saying. This from Harry Lime's Shadow really struck a chord for me. A film can be considered old if you remember seeing it on its release, but the person you're talking to wasn't even born then. And that is something I think we're all experiencing more and more. It wasn't just that they didn't see it, they weren't actually in the world. But there may be something more to it. It may also be to do with the form of the film. And many of you brought up the rise of CGI. This is from Chatsabo657. Anything pre-CGI, I guess. Aliens, The Thing, Nightmare on Elm Street, stuff with old school model work. And that ties in very nicely to a comment by Labette. Aliens. Used to watch it with my best friend repeatedly as teenagers in the early 2000s and still think it was made recently. Coincidentally, I rewatched Uncle Boone Me last week and completely forgot that it was released 6 years ago. I understand that entirely. I mean, one of the things with Uncle Boone Me is it's a film that could have been released at any time, and it still would have looked utterly, utterly timeless. A number of you incidentally brought up the issue of series movies, like the X-Men series, sort of universe movies, and saying that these things continue to feel new because the series is ongoing. A lot of discussion about whether the old Star Wars films are ever considered old. I want to end with this from Patch Adams. For me, the films that feel old came out at significant periods of my life and are forever fixed in that time, whereas films that came out before don't seem to age, which is a very interesting point. Goes on to say, for example, my year zero is Star Trek Generation. It came out when I was 13, you do the maths, and makes me feel old watching it. However, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which came out when I was 3, never feels old or dated. In fact, its themes of aging and recapturing your youth grows more poignant with each viewing. I think this is a really good point. Year zero is the moment that you become self-aware of films in your life. Maybe that is what distinguishes what we think of as new and what we think of as old. But then some of us are just old.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.